I'm rooting for the Dolphins.
That's not, you are a Dolphins
I'm
fan.
a Dolphins fan.
I like that coach. That's the one thing I like. I guess.
Gay fish. But I don't know. And then there were rumors they was going to get fired after 3 games. I was like,
You know, it doesn't make sense to fire a coach in the middle of the season in the NFL. If you're going to fire him, fire him. Let him know you're going to fire him. But let's fix the season. You're not getting any benefit of firing him.
how's your nephew? Is he playing at all for the? Was he how's our practice squad?
I was just telling Glenn, he was on the he suited up his best for Arizona. Then after the game, they put him on the practice squad. Carolina picked him up.
What? Oh wow.
Anytime you go on to the practice squad, that's basically the equivalent of being waived. So any team can pick you up.
So he's moving to Carolina or?
His wife just drove cross country. They joined him in Arizona. Just get back in the car and go back.
Let's get an opportunity.
Right? What am I?
Oh, you can't.
Yes, I can. And we have to be done by 7:45 because that's when the books reading thing starts. The presentation, so the program starts at 7:45, so we have to be out at 7:45. Okay, page 92. We begin with Psalm 27. Achashoalti meis Adonai oso avakesh. Achashoalti meis Adonai oso avakesh. Lai 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 shivti beveis Adonai kol yemei chayai lachazos benoam Adonai ulavaker beheichalo ay achas noam benoam Adonai ulavaker beheichalo. Lulei himanti l'ruf b'tov Adonai be'eretz chaim kavei el Adonai chazak v'yametz libecha v'kavei el Adonai. Mourner's Kaddish. Yiskadal v'yiskadash shemei rabbah v'yalma divra kirusei v'yamlech malchusei v'chayechon v'yomechon uv'chayei d'chol beis Yisrael v'agala uv'izman kori v'yimaru amen. Yehei shmei rabbah mavarach la'olam ul'omei amayah. Yisbarach, v'yishtabach, v'yispa'ar, v'yisramam, v'yisnaseh, v'yishadar, v'yis'aleh, v'yishalal, shmei d'kudusha, b'rechu, le'elah, le'elah, mikol berchasa v'shirasa, tush b'chasa v'nechamasa, dat me'ran b'alma v'imaru, amen. Yehei shalama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'imaru, amen. Oseh shalom b'rama, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael, Imaru, amen. Page 137. Urachum yachaper v'lon v'leyaschis v'rbol shiva pavlir chachamaso Adonai Oshemach Yanenu v'yom karenu Baruchu es Adonai hamavorach Baruch Adonai mavorach le'olam ba'ed. El chai v'kayom tobidim olchenu le'olam ba'ed Baruch atah Adonai ha'ma'ariv ha'ravim Ahavas halam beis Yisrael amcha ahavta. V'ahavas kol tasir mimenu le'olamim Baruch atah Adonai Ohev amo Yisrael Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Ani Adonai Elohechem Asher tzeschi eschem mieretz Mitzrayim liyosachem leElohim Ani Adonai Elohechem Amen. Umalchus baratzon kiblo eleihem Moshe v'Yisrael chonush rav simcha rabba v'yamru chulam Michamocha ba'elim Adonai Mikamocha nedar ba'kodesh Norah sehilos osefela Malchus charov v'necha b'keyam lefnei Moshe ze'eli anu v'yamru Adonai yimloch li'olam ba'ed B'ne'emar kifar Adonai es Yaakov go'olo miyad chazak mimenu Baruch atah Adonai Ga'al Yisrael. Hashki ben or there's something. Ushmort seisenu avoenu l'chaim u'l'shalom me'atavi ad olam baruch atah Adonai shomer amo Yisrael la'ad. Baruch Adonai l'olam amen b'amen. Baruch Adonai mitzion shechen Yerushalayim hallelujah. Adonai melech, Adonai malach, Adonai yimloch le'olam ba'ed. Ki ha'malchus shelcha hi l'mayat timloch b'chavod, ki ein lana malcha la'ata baruch atah Adonai. Ha'melech b'chavodo tomid yimloch aleinu le'olam ba'ed v'yal kol ma'asav. Yizkadal v'yizkadash me'rabah, v'yamad ivra kirsev yilmech malchus b'chayechon v'yamechon v'chayet chol beis Yisrael b'agalav v'zman kariv imiru. Amen. Yesh me'rabah m'varach la'olam alomei omayah. Yisbarach, Vishtabach, Yisparvis, Ramami, Yisna, Sevi, Yisadarvi, Yisalevi, Yisalosh, Shmei Kudusha, Brechu, Leila, Leila, Mikol, Brachas of Ashira, Sachish, Pasavina, Chamasa, Dami, Ranbi, Alma, Imaru, Amen. Yamidah begins on page 142. Please remember to add the insertions for the period between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. B'sefer Chaim b'racha v'shalom u'farnasa tova. Nizocher v'nikasev lefanecha. Anachnu v'chol amecha beis Yisroel. L'chaim tovim u'l'shalom. Yiskadal v'yiskash merabah Yama divra kirsev el mechmachu se b'chayechon v'yamechon v'chayetcho beis Yisrael b'agalav izman kariv yimeru amen. Yesh me'rabam v'arach la'olam alom hayom hayah. Yisbarach v'yishbach v'yispar v'yishmami yisnaseh v'yishadar v'yisalev v'yisalosh meid kudusha brich le'ela le'ela mikol brachas v'shirasat shpasav v'nechmasad aviran b'yama v'yimeru amen. Yiskabel tzolsonu v'oson d'chais v'kadamu v'hon v'yishmaya v'yimeru amen. Yesh lamarav m'shmaya v'cham aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'yimeru amen. Oseh shalom b'mramav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'yimeru amen. Aleinu l'shabeach la'adon ha'kol l'seis gedula liotzer breshis shelo asanu kigayei ha'ratzos v'lo samanu k'mishpachos ha'adama shelo sam chelkenu kahem v'gor aleinu kechol hamonam v'anachnu korim u'mishtachavim u'modim Lifnei melech malchei amlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ki amalchus shelcha hi u'mayad timloch bechavod kakasu b'sar sechad anayim loch le'elam va'ed V'nemar v'hoya Adonai lamelech al kol haaretz Bayom hahu Yehiyeh Adonai echad U'shemo
Tonight and tomorrow, the 8th day of Tishrei, we have people mourning for Arthur Ice, Edward Winnick, Harry Zonstein, Howard Krebs, Lynn Worsham, Samuel Walwick, and Sarah Sapkowitz. Anybody else?
And you're all back up.
Yosef Ben Zalman Baruch.
Bessie, Brenna, Badar Lamshul. Enoch Cohen, Ben Shia.
Anybody on Zoom? The Borders College, page 151.
Yiskadal v'yiskadash shemei rabbah V'yalma divra kirusei v'yamlech malchusei V'chayechon v'yomechon uv'chayei d'chol beis Yisrael Ba'agalav izman kariv yimeru amen. Yehei shmei rabbah mavarach la'olam u'la'omei amaya Yisbarach v'yishtabach v'yispa'ar v'yisroman v'yisnaseh V'yishadar v'yis'aleh v'yishalal shmei d'kudusha b'richu Le'ela mikol berchasa v'shirasa Tush b'chasa v'nechemasa Da'mi ran b'yalma v'meru amen. Yehei shalama rabba min shemaya V'chayim aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'meru amen. Oseh shalom b'mramav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'meru amen. And we turn to page 208. Avinu Shabbat Sur Yisrael v'golo Berech es Medinas Yisrael Reishis Michas Giulasenu Again Aleha Be'vras Chasdecha Ufros Aleha Sukash Lamecha Ushlach Orcha V'mitzacha L'Rashaha Sareha V'yotzeha V'sakneim B'yetz Tovah Milfanecha Chazek Es Yidei Miginei Eretz Kodeshenu V'hanchilem Eloheinu Yeshua V'ateres Nitzachon Te'etrem V'nasata Shalom Ba'aretz V'simcha Salam Li'yoshveha V'nomar Amen. Kolod b'leva penima Nefesh Yehudi Yehomia Ulfaase Mizrach Kadima Ayin Letzion Sophia Od lo avda tikvaseinu Atikva bashanos alpayim Leosam chofshi be'artzeinu Eretz Zion b'Yerushalayim Leosam chofshi be'artzeinu Eretz Zion b'Yerushalayim. Baruch Shia. Services tomorrow morning, 6:45 a.m. Tomorrow evening, 7:30 p.m. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you for all. Good night, Carol. Have a good night, everyone. This is your little clicker.
Want to be able to see this? Okay. I'm going to stand.
As you please. And
They give you a wire mic, and one of the wireless is not.
okay, so this one is wired, this one is wired. Okay.
Is that one working, the wire?
Yes.
Oh, it is, okay.
One of our wireless is.
I got it. One is.
You're good.
Avery. Mr. Richie.
The back. With this, which just a clip.
No, the arrows on the side. That's the move forward and that's the move back.
Okay. Okay. Great.
In case you have any trouble, just this is the reflection.
Also, I can point this down.
Not
I
necessarily.
can point it here.
Try it, try it. There you go.
Oh, yeah.
But just in case, I think.
Okay, it's there. Okay, thank you. That's good. Are you sitting up there?
I will eventually.
Patience is a virtue. Yeah, it's like if Tovah has to talk in here. Can I use it there? What's that?
Can you hear me? Oh, it works. Okay. So, hello everyone. I am Lauren Resnikoff, and I am the religious school director here. And it is a wonderful privilege to be able to introduce Dr. Tovah Klein this evening. She is the Director Emerita of Barnard College Center for Toddler Development, and has also served as an adjunct associate professor. Prior to coming to Barnard, Dr. Klein was a clinical fellow at Harvard and clinical psychology intern at Boston Children's Hospital. She received her doctorate in psychology from Duke University. Her research, teaching, and applied work is focused on understanding children's social and emotional development, parental influences on children's development, and parents' experiences raising children. She is an advisor to programs for children worldwide, including Room to Grow, Ubuntu Pathways, Children's Museum of Manhattan, and Hunts Point's Alliance for Children. She's an advisor to children's media, including National Geographic and Apple TV+. She has authored many articles, including for the New York Times and CNBC. She's also the author of 2 books, Raising Resilience, How to Help Our Children Thrive in Times of Uncertainty, and How Toddlers Thrive, What Parents Can Do Today to Plant the Seeds of Lifelong Success. We are grateful that she has joined us this evening. Welcome, Dr. Tovah Klein.
Thank you for that. If I speak without this, you all
No, you need it.
You need it? Oh, because you have live stream, sorry. Sorry, live stream people, hi. Okay, I have to stand, I'm a professor, I have to stand to talk. I'll sit to talk to Claire, but. So thank you for that warm welcome, and also just thank you to your community. I've met a number of you, and just the warmth is very appreciated, particularly today, right now, this world. So I'm really happy to be here on this journey that we're all on as parents. I am the mother of 3 now young men. So I have adult children. I had little ones for many years, then middle, and then teens, and now adults. And I wrote this book on uncertainty called Raising Resilience at a time that was less uncertain, but I'm going to start by talking about uncertainty because what's the thing that we're always dealing with? It's that. So this is where I come from. Resilience helps us face uncertainty, and equally, uncertainty is that gift that helps us build resilience. I think it's really important to remember that because the world is always uncertain. We're living in a particular time. You're raising children, or you have grandchildren, or you have children you care about. This is a particularly uncertain time, but times are always uncertain. You know, speak to parents, friends, grandparents. And anxiety, 20 years ago, I used to say to my staff at my center, anxiety is really high amongst parents. Let's just be that much more calming. And then the next year I was like, anxiety's up. And after a few years, I was just like, all right, forget it. This is New York City, anxiety's just high. But we do live in a particularly stressful moment in time for all kinds of reasons that you can think about. And then people have their own individual stressors as well. But I really do harness the idea that uncertainty is something that can help us raise children who can really face the world. And that's my goal, is for us all to raise and support decent human beings over time, so they can go out in the world and be decent. So I'm going to start with uncertainty. Why? Because, whoops, this happens on its own. It's another computer. It's a given. I promise you it's a given. Any day of the week, any cultural context, uncertainty is always there. It happens every day. Depending on the age of your child, it's different uncertainties. There's a change in the routine. That's very hard for young children, but it's hard for most of us. A child goes to school. I can remember my middle schoolers, they'd come home just in a huff because that teacher was out today. And I would say to them, but you don't like that teacher, always complaining about her. Yeah, but she wasn't there. Nobody really likes change, so whether it's the math test they're worried about, or you're trying to get a toddler out the door and you can't find the red shoes and you realize you left them at your mother's house, whatever it is, there's always something going on. But in the lines of work I do, I work with what I call everyday challenges that are hard, but they're everyday. Some are bigger than others. And then I also work in what we now call the field of trauma, but actually when I started working with children and families that were experiencing abuse, we didn't even call it that. But when you think of real crises that happen, when bad things happen, and you can think of bad things on a sort of world level, on community levels, on individual levels, from, fleeing a fire to, the anti-Semitism of the world, whatever, when bad things happen, we're facing uncertainty. The first question is, how do I get to safety? And you get there, right? But it forces us to face the unknown. And so this is how I think about what parents are doing all the time, is you're helping children with uncertainty. But you're also helping yourself with it, right? Because we face uncertainty all the time as parents. And so it's a parallel process. Okay, so, and then I'm just gonna layer it, not to make everybody anxious. I actually pride myself in sort of trying to calm people, but we do live in a very unique time as Jewish parents today, and yet not a unique time, right? It's both. And I think people need to keep that in mind. It's not that there wasn't anti-Semitism when I was born 60 plus years ago, or for any of you in this room, but it's increasing, and I say increased. It's increased and it's increasing. It's not going down. And that elevates our stress even more than whatever stress we're coming into this day with. And then understanding the world we live in and providing a sense of safety for our children. And again, that's not only as Jewish people or Jewish parents, but the world we're in. And then we each carry a Jewish narrative. I think this is the piece that when I think about, well, what is it that Jewish parents or Jewish community needs that might be slightly different than other communities, is that we all carry this narrative within us. Our past, our parents' past, our ancestors' past, and the now. And you can really think about, well, what's that narrative you carry, right? The fears, the anxieties, but also the positives. And we tend to forget that. So that's part of us, and we convey messages to our children all the time. Even when you don't think you are, I promise you. We can't help ourselves. So what's the thing about uncertainty, and why does that relate to resilience? Well, uncertainty causes stress. And if it didn't cause stress, it wouldn't be such a big deal, actually. And then as psychologists, we wouldn't have jobs. And this is why. We as humans like homeostasis. Do you remember biology? Or maybe some of you are biologists, but you remember biology, whether it was high school, college biology, we learned about this thing called homeostasis. I always loved the word, but maybe I was primed to be a psychologist. I was like, oh, that sounds good. That's when you're really grounded. Like all of your systems, You know, your body's calm, your heart's not racing, you're not sweating, your mind's not racing. It's actually a state that all mammals like to be in, of homeostasis. That's sort of our baseline, right? We're not excited, we're calm, we're good. And here's the good news, bad news, is that children really count on us to get back to that state. And it's human nature, it's mammal nature to get back to that state, which I find very interesting, right? It's not just us, it's all mammals. But we have to be there to help our children because we are the buffer. And that's where resilience starts to come into play. Like, how do we help children develop resilience? We are the buffer, but we have to get ourselves back to this calm state. And sometimes parents ask me, so I put it right here, yes, even when the world is spinning, and I should say especially when the world is spinning. And what I mean by that is maybe something bad happened today. Maybe you're just really tense because who knows what headline you read. Somebody said to me, I don't read the news anymore. And I said, yeah, but do you read the headlines? And she was like, yeah. And I said, do you feel your heart rate going up? She said, yeah. I said, well, just the headlines can be enough. Or a friend tells you something, or you get those texts. So my first piece of advice is just take notifications off your phone. Like, I didn't realize how many notifications people had, partly because I would say, well, if I'm somebody whose mind races all the time, which I am, and kind of have ADHD, and I can't have notifications on my phone because I can't do anything. I have text notifications. That's because I have children and a husband, and I want to at least know if I should check my text. But I can't do that. But I always say to parents, like, you want to really think about, do you really want to know not just the sports scores, which, here's the advantage of having children, I get the sports scores from them. But it's not just the sport, it's all the news, and it doesn't stop. But you could say, I'm going to check that at these times of day if you want to have the news. So when the world is spinning, children look to us with this literally like, is everything okay? And we're the ones who go, yeah, it's going to be okay. Even when inside we're like, I don't know if it's going to be okay. The children need us on a day-to-day basis to say, we've got this. And that's where it makes it very hard for us as adults. But this is why the question of every child, yes, teenagers too, and I'm finding young adults, is who will take care of me? So it's easiest to think about this in our youngest children. I should have asked this. Any of you have toddlers? Are you parents of toddlers currently? Okay. And who has like those middle, like elementary, middle school, okay? And then high school, college? Anybody? Some. And then I realize on live stream you might be there. And then the adult children who are still our children, right? And I say all the work I do is with this goal of we want our children to come back. Right? When they leave home and it's a choice to come home, we want them to come back. And this is always the question, and we think about it with younger children more than sort of the middle and upper ages, but every child turns to a parent with, are you still going to be able to take care of me? So after 9/11, I did a big study, families of young children who had been directly witness to the attacks or the falling of the towers, and every parent I talk to says at some point in that day, after they fled, after they've gotten somewhere, regroup, whatever, some adult in that room said, we got to get these kids lunch. Right? Why? Because the children want to know who's going to take care of me. Where does somebody else's house tonight? Where are we going to sleep? You're going to put me to bed. This happens when someone in your family dies. This happens when a bad thing happens in the world and you have to tell your child, or they hear it at school. At the end of the day, and our teenagers do this too, they're like, are you going to be home for dinner? That's comforting to children. Okay, and it puts the onus on us. So let me just define resilience. I'm gonna keep track of time. I always start with what it's not, because how many of you think of resilience and you go, I want my kid to be tough? Like some people, yeah. We think, we don't want them to be wimps. And then you say, yeah, but I want them to be kind. And is kindness wimpy? And I say, no, that's not wimpy, right? So we kind of want both. We want them to be kind people, but we want them to be tough. And what I'm going to tell you is resilience is actually not tough love. It's not armor, although there are plenty of times as a parent that you sort of wish your children had armor on. But it's also not a trait. Because very often parents will say to me, she's just not resilient. He's not resilient. I say, well, if it was just a trait, Again, I'd be out of work, but it would be too simple. And it's not a dose. You know, you don't have it or not have it. You can think of yourself. There's times that you kind of get back up and you're like, I'm not going to let that get me down. I'm going to go for that job that I wanted. I'm going to get that promotion. And there's other times that you feel beaten down. Children are the same way. Sometimes they're really good at getting back up, and sometimes they're not. And I'll talk about relationships and why that is. But this is what I really think about and wrote about, and this is what the research will tell you. It's about adapting, adjusting, and being flexible. Because when you're faced with uncertainty, when you're faced with the disappointment, you didn't make the soccer team, the teacher didn't give you the grade you wanted. I was a college professor for 30 years. The students come in like, I've never had a B+ on my paper. And I would always think to myself, well, now you do. But I wouldn't say that. I'd say, well, let's look at the paper. Let's, so can you adjust? Can you be adaptable? Young children, you see them trying to problem solve, figure it out. And if you can back off of them a little bit and let them problem solve, figure it out, they usually come up with another way to do it, or they walk away, which is also fine. I'm not going to do that right now. I'm mad. So this is really what I think every parent wants for their child, the ability to handle life and setbacks and the unknowns, because I can promise you everybody's going to face unknowns. Like, we can't be there hovering over them like we are with our infants. And even your 1.5-year-olds, they start walking out in the world, you have to start backing off a little. It's hard. So when I think about what resilience is and how we build it, it's really this. It's not avoiding the setbacks, it's helping them face it. Sometimes that's what feels like only parents say, I'm only going to commiserate with her, and I say, yeah, you're going to say, yeah. That's not fun when your friend says, I don't want to play with you. That's not fun when you don't make the homecoming court, which somebody just told me their daughter was devastated she didn't make the homecoming court. I was like, they still do homecoming courts? But they do. But you want to help them face hurdles, and often that's just being there, which is hard. So how do our children ever get there? I'm going to go through this a little bit quickly, but when you think of your child now, that's now. I always say raising children is a long-term project. Why? Because childhood is long. There's all kinds of neuroscience behind this. But our goal, I think, for all of us is to raise decent human beings who become adults one day. Right? That's a long path, because becoming independent, having agency in your life is a slow, steady road. It's a long road. But it's embedded in relationships. And that's really the thing to think about, is that resilience happens because they learn to trust you. Here's a parent who's going to take care of me even when I really mess up. I always said when my children were younger, I want them to come home and tell me what they did at school that they dreaded telling me. I want them to still be able to tell me. And I would think, like, so what do I do now not to come down too hard on them, even when I say, that's not happening, so that they would be able to come home and hopefully tell me. And then they're also developing their sense of self through their relationship with you. And connection. Connection to you becomes connection to other people. I'm loved, I can love other people. And that's where it gets back to us. Everything gets back to you as the adult. That's either the good news or not good news. But how do you know yourself as the parent or the caregiver? And this is what I go through in my book, and so it's sprinkled through the talk and through my discussion with Claire, which is they need to feel safe, they need to trust you. That's what helps them learn about emotions. Anger, disappointment, frustration, they're not easy emotions, but we all have them. And when we as the parent go, I can get to a place where I can handle my child's anger, the child feels safer. Often we want to just shut it down. Don't be upset, don't be upset, don't be upset. Because that's what leads to, I call it the freedom trail in the book. I say that's because I'm a second born and I was always pushing for freedom. And then connection to others, right? So they move out in the world, they move out of our little sphere, they move into, or even from the beginning, they have other adults, so that, it might be grandparents, caregivers, teachers, and they move into the peers. We want them to have a community of their own as they grow older. But we also disconnect, which I will talk about in a moment. And then the final pillar that I talk about in my book, but I always say to people, you could just start with that, is accepting children for who they are. because that's really a challenge for us. If any of you have that child that was harder, is harder, will continue to be harder to understand, or is not what you expected in a child, or you don't like parts of your child, most of us have that, you're like, really, my kid is like that? You have to work really hard, because when we accept them for who they are, they become their full self. Okay, and all of this goes into building resilience, because it's that back and forth with you. So I'm going to just give you a little task, and you online, to think for a moment, what do you want for your children when they grow up, or children in your care, or children in your life? Like, what do you think about you want them to have as children, then as teens, and eventually as adults? What characteristics do you come up with? Empathy, right? We want them to care, and care about others who are like them and others who aren't like them. Somebody else want to throw something out? Yeah.
Be good communicators.
We hope they'll be good communicators. Good luck. No. Well, and that again comes through our openness to them, and hearing them allows them to learn to communicate.
Internally
Motivated, yeah. This is always like, parents come to me with their toddlers and they're frustrated with just how, they're stuck on one thing, and I say, you just wait, because you're going to come back to me and you're going to say, she's not persistent. 2-year-olds persist. You want them to persist, because that's motivation. Strong values. So define for yourselves, what are your values? We hope that they'll have some of them, and what our core values are.
believing themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, we want them to get independent. We want them to believe in themselves, confidence. So all of the above. So if you think about that, I would say this is a list, but you've done it. There's the self pieces, right? That kind of confidence, belief in self. Sometimes people say passion. And then what I call the other-oriented, right? You want them to have connections, community, empathy, kindness. It's both. And that's the hard part. Yeah.
I think you started the lecture with saying, when we talk about a strong sense of their identity and self, it's like really knowing your narrative. And it starts with knowing like your family story. Like you
Yeah.
have that, if that can ground you, you can go anywhere with it.
Right, so if you do this kind of exercise, like what's my family story, like you're saying, what's my family story, what matters to me, what are my values, we convey that to our children. They sometimes get it, they sometimes don't.
Is there a study about like kids who know their family
Please.
story?
Can you, not sorry to cut you off, can you save that for the questions? It's a great no, it's a great question. It's a great question, because narrative, I actually do some work on narrative, and it really matters. And you get both, is we want our children to have the self-oriented and other-oriented. And we forget that sometimes. Like sometimes we're too much like, be nice, be kind, share all this stuff, and we forget, we also want them to say, what do I want? And they can say no. So it's both going together. This is where they get it, from you. From whether you're a grandparent, you're a parent, you're a teacher. And I think we underestimate, I have grandparents here, daddy, mommy, right? It's in that relationship that they build the sense of self and their care for others. Doesn't mean you need to be perfect. Please don't, if you're listening or in the room, think, oh my gosh, I've messed up. Of course, we all mess up. I have 3. But we matter more than anything else for children, and that's lifelong. When they're home with us, those first 18 years, say, it really matters. They're counting on us. But I don't think in many ways that we can even appreciate it, how much we matter to children. Except when you really mess up and you're in a rift with your child at any age and you feel terrible. Somebody just sent me, I have a private parenting kind of consultation. This mother sent me this long email, said, please save this for our meeting next week. And in it, she was so distressed over probably not her best behavior with her 6-year-old that she said, I didn't sleep the entire night. Right? So it's like we really beat ourselves up, and I'm not suggesting you do that. I'm suggesting you be kinder to yourself, but know that you do matter to your children. And when children regress, which in many ways are the most challenging behaviors, not the only challenging behaviors, whether it's a 3-year-old potty training stuff, sleep, or it's a teenager just back talking like you've never heard out of their mouth, completely disorganized middle schoolers who were organized, You have to know that when there's stress or there's change, they are looking to us to support them. That's where their resilience is going to come from. And when they regress, it's because they're stressed. And probably you're stressed, but they're stressed. So those are all the ways they show that. The hard thing is that in stressful moments, and often those stressful moments are both us and them, right? They need us more than ever. And so the onus is back on us to find our grounding. I have this in my book, but I can't say it enough. Having a mantra for yourself, or a set of them, like, I'm the adult, I need to take a deep breath. Or I will say, I love all my children, I'm close to them as adults, but one of my children is just like me, and I literally would be in battles with him at 2, at 4, at 14, and I would have to say in my head, my mantra was, he's not out to get me. And then I would laugh, right? And I would think, feel your feet on the floor, and then I'd say to him, like, okay, let's figure this out. Because you can go back, and if they're really little, you can't walk out of the room, right? They're too little, but you say to yourself, she's just a little girl. I'm gonna help her, right? So mantras help us. Okay, so think about then, well, how does resilience come to be in them? If it's in this relationship, how do we then have it reside in the child? I always think it's the parent-child, and it's almost like they get a little suitcase, which is really like their heart and soul, that eventually resides in them. So security is the main piece, safety. That's really hard in the world today, isn't it? We're not feeling safe many times. I started to read some of the headlines before I left to go to the subway to get on the railroad, to go out here, and I was like, you know what, I need to not read any headline. I'm just gonna go give this great talk. I'm not gonna read those headlines, because I can feel my stress level going up. It doesn't matter what website you're on, one headline right now will set you off. But why do they need that? Because they need to know, I am not alone in this world. No matter what happens, somebody's here for me, and that's somebody who matters are really the main caregivers. But also, I won't be judged or shamed. Children do a lot of rotten things. They're great, but they do a lot of rotten things. Some that push maybe one parent's button, but not the other. That's always good, right? Because then you have the other parent can swoop in. Because they internalize this relationship of, even when I'm really not good, even when I'm really doing what they think are bad things, I'm still loved, is what becomes their resilience. I'm gonna be okay because I got these people. Okay. And there's gonna always be mishaps. And why do we do that? Because you get the chance every single day to have mishaps. Either you're not on best behavior or your child's having a rough time. You know, your toddler's throwing their food, your 6-year-old's melting down because their friend wouldn't play with them yesterday and now they don't wanna go to school. Like, it could be a myriad of things. Teenagers have a whole set of their own. But you're really setting them up for this. Bad stuff happens. And some of the parents that I work with at the center that I ran for so many years would always say, you're always giving us the bad side of things. And I was like, I know, because everybody wants to talk about the good side. I want to tell you bad things will happen too, and good things will happen, and you want to prepare them for the bad. So when you cut their sandwich wrong, that's bad, but you don't have to make them a new sandwich. So it really is our job to help them. And it helps us, I think, to see that we're not avoiding, we're not going to take away the bad. You can't. We can't take away all the bad. But we so often want to move them to happy. I mean, it's just, that's a good parent instinct. That's not a bad parent instinct. You can watch, I watched a mother dog who had a litter of puppies this summer, and to see her constantly going and not just nursing all those puppies, but calming them, licking them, grooming them. And I was like, oh, it's natural instinct to want to make our children happy. But that doesn't help children. You know, it's not fun when your friend doesn't want to play. The social media thing will drive you crazy when you have older kids. But you have to help them through it, and that means taking care of yourself. So let's get back to uncertainty for a moment, because it always becomes about us. How does it make you feel? And be honest. my clicker thing didn't work, so it already gave you my answers. But maybe be honest when you think to yourself, so how do I feel when there's unknown coming, or I'm unsure, or I'm anxious about the world? Because that's what destabilizes us and makes us shaky, and your children pick up on it. It's not that you can't be that way. Of course you're going to be that way. But it's sometimes our children that remind us, because either their behavior disintegrates, or older kids will say to you, hey, what's wrong? Or one of mine used to say to me, you're in a bad mood. And I would say, yes, I am, you're right. And it would kind of snap me out of it, like, you're right. But also, as children get older, you can say to them, look, I'm stressed from work, from something else. I'm a little worried about this. For years, I was worried about my parents when they were sick. And I would just say to them, look, I'm worried about your grandparents. I'm okay, and I'm going to still be home tonight. Again, they want to know, are you going to be okay enough to take care of me? We like the known. We like stability. So I say this, in many ways we're all toddlers inside, because everybody seems to know toddlers like routine, and toddlers like when things are just so and don't change. But so do the rest of us. And this is why when uncertainty happens, it's the unexpected. And the way our brains work is they work on prediction. Think of patterns. When you figure out patterns and you know the next thing, we like predictable. And when things are unpredictable or unexpected, we get aroused, we get anxious, which can be good, by the way. That's very speaking of motivation, that's motivating in some ways. But when anxiety gets too high or arousal comes at the wrong moment, you have to calm yourself back down. And that does not happen when things are steady. So what do? We clamp down, we look for control, we sometimes rush in. Let me fix that for you, let me fix that for you. We tantrum, we yell, we react, we do all of these things, but we also expect too much from our children. Why can't you just get that together? Why didn't you take your homework yesterday? We put a lot of blame on them, and if we're stressed, I guarantee you they're stressed. So here's my tip. It sounds so simple, but review for yourself when you leave tonight. What are your expectations for your child? And I have to put this in because we all have a firstborn. Whether you have one child or 5 or 7, we all have a firstborn, and we tend to be too hard on our firstborns. We think they're older than they are. We expect more, etc. So bring it down, and also know that when you apologize genuinely to your child, it strengthens the relationship. They go, oh, we can come back together. But you have to own your own stuff, and it's hard. So this is what I see as sort of what we're doing for children. When we allow them to experience what in the literature is called good stress, eustress, they'll learn this: I'm not alone, I'll be okay. But they also learn that parent, that adult believes in me. So it's not just cheering them on to cheer them on, but to say, yeah, that was not fun. I think you're going to be okay tomorrow. Yeah, you are going to go back to school. You're going to get there. We know that actually in anxiety, avoiding something that you're afraid of is actually not good for that anxious child. Why? Because it teaches a child, I got through it, I'm okay, and I didn't do it alone. And that becomes their language to their self. I'm okay. These parents are here for me. Okay. So I'm going to go through this quickly. What gets in the way of this process? Us. We're human, we have feelings. I'm always like, the good news is we have feelings, the bad news is we have feelings. It makes us who we are, it gives us beliefs, expectations, and you really have to do that work. I call it getting through the ick factor. Oh, what's my responsibility here? Oh, I really did want him to be a superstar at that thing, and that's not his thing. Oh my gosh, I am the one pushing. It's not about him. So really figuring out your own stuff, and I have that a lot in my book called The You Factor. So here's the aim. It's being good enough. You've probably heard this. It's not new. In spite of what pop literature reports, perfectionism is not new. It was written about in the 1950s, but if you can shed that perfectionism and say, you know what children need? They need us to be good enough. They need us to put them to bed at the end of the night and say, I love you even though this was a really rough day, and I'm going to still love you if tomorrow's rough. They really need us to do that. They need us to say, you can hate your sister right now. It's all right. I'm still going to get dinner for all of us, right? Those are hard feelings for them. And so, again, I write about this, and Claire and I are going to talk about it a little. What does it mean to have an unconditional safe space that's you? It doesn't mean it's a free-for-all, but it does mean saying, yeah, you can be mad. You can be mad even though that's not going to happen. But really the security of I've got you. And then when we disconnect, which you will, and the older children get, the more you disconnect. And the more kids you have, the more you don't understand them, I think. It's not that you mess up, it's that we reconnect. And I can't emphasize that enough. Sometimes it's called repair, sometimes it's called reconnection, it's the same thing. And that's what's going to strengthen your relationship. And that's going to get you to sort of what I started with. The person this child is meant to be, and guess what? It's not all in our control. I don't know how many of you thought, oh, I have this baby, and I'm going to love this baby, and he or she's going to become who I think they should be, right? I was that parent. I was like, if I give the right love, and I put enough parameters, and then, when he didn't sleep, I was like, what am I doing wrong? We blame ourselves, and like, pediatrician said to me one day, he's just not a great sleeper. And I was like, thank you, right? It's like, some babies just aren't. Didn't get me any more sleep, but because what children need to grow into is self-love and self-acceptance. They've got strengths, they've got weaknesses, they've got brain wiring, they are who they are in the world. That's not always up to us. And again, if you have more than one child, you know that, because it's like that baby's handed to you, whether you adopt a baby, whether you birth a baby, whether a partner births a baby. They come into your arms, and if you have more than one, you might know that they're so different from that minute that they come into this world. It's like jarring. But when we listen to them and we genuinely hear them, even when we're like, ooh, I didn't want you to have that thing that I had as a child, or versus like when you're like blaming it on your partner or your ex, you're like, oh, you're just like that one. We all do that. But that we really aim to understand who they are, and that again is taking care of ourselves first and thinking about what are your expectations and being honest with yourself and trying. I always say when I'm teaching college students, how can we get our glasses to be clear and not rose colored? It's not easy, but I think we owe that to children. Okay, and then find your mantra, which I already said. This is not forever is a good one. So I'm going to leave it at that. If you're social media people, which I am just a little bit, it makes me very wary. That's my stuff. That's how you can reach me. And I'm going to now have a discussion with Claire. Thank you.
Because for the live stream, they can see you better over there. That's fun. Hi, so for those who don't know, I'm Claire Brockstein. I'm the chair of the Board of Ed here, and also a parent of 10 and 12-year-old boys. So I have a couple of questions about my own stuff.
There's 5 boys between us.
Yeah, it's a lot of boy energy. So I think as a community, we all have a lot of questions about how we talk to our kids about rising anti-Semitism. And for a lot of us, we have our own stuff about it. Like, I grew up in the Midwest, and I thought that anti-Semitism wasn't a thing, and then it became very clear to me that it was. And I don't want my kids to be blindsided the way that I was, but I also don't want to scare them. And then we had October 7th, and they came home with lots of things that felt very scary that we weren't presenting them with, but that they were hearing from, like, the world. And I don't think that we handled it great, honestly, as in my house, but like...
Probably nobody did on October 7th.
Thank you. Makes me feel better.
Or 8th.
Yeah. But do you have any tips for us in how we help our kids to live in this world as it is?
I feel like this is the million-dollar question. So I'm not going to pretend I have a full answer, but I will tell you how I think about this, and you can see the work I do. I think about it a lot. So there's 2 pieces to this. Well, there's many pieces to this, but I'm going to give you 2 big pieces, I think, for children. One is, how do we help them understand the bad, the anti-Semitism being the bad, and not scare them? Because to go through life scared sets them up really to be derailed and not become that independent person that they're going to become anyhow. And also years are on the verge of teenage years, you kind of don't want them to go out in the world scared, because then they actually do take more risks sometimes, right? They're going to take risks anyhow. They're going to be teenagers. So part of it is, how do we really think about that? And I think the other narrative piece is, how do we think about ourselves as Jews? And what narrative do we want to give them about being Jewish? So the pride, these are your, the ancestry, the culture, and we're talking about others. And that gets very tricky, because when we vilify others, which many people were doing October 7th, 8th, see how long it lasts. And I'm at Barnard College, Barnard, Columbia, and I live right there. So I was steeped in it at every level. Is that we're also giving them messages about self and their pride in self and all the good things about being Jews. And we're talking about them, the empathy, other piece. So it's very tricky, except that I think there's a way to really say to children, I've always known, I as the parent, I've always known that there are people in the world who don't like Jewish people. And there's people in the world who do. And the good news is, depending on where you live or who you're with, the people we're surrounded by, for the most part, know Jewish people or don't know Jewish people. But I think where you are in Manhasset, it's a lot of Jewish people. But not everybody feels that way. And I don't want you to go out in the world scared. I just want you to know that there's some people who might say something, and I want you to be able to come home and say, hey, why did that happen? And then I'm going to give you a story, which is, my kids went to a very small public school in New York City, where they were really one of very few Jewish kids. And one of my children came home in second grade and said, Mommy, my friends are telling me that bad things are going to happen to me because I don't believe in Jesus, because it was Christmas time, right? And of course, my kids wanted Christmas, and those kids wanted Hanukkah, because who doesn't want 8 days of presents? My kids want a Christmas tree, the whole thing. And he was like, why are they saying this? And I thought to myself, okay, I could either say these are anti-Semitic kids, or I could say they don't know Jewish kids. So I went and talked to the teacher, and I said to them, they don't really know what it means to be Jewish. And so here's what they're worried about. And then I explained that we had friends, who also celebrated Christmas, were Christian. I had never really discussed with my kids what it meant to be Jewish in a Christian world. But the truth is, we live in a Christian world. So then I explained it to him. So my son goes, I went back and said, you don't have to worry about me. I'm Jewish, and nothing bad's going to happen. And his friends were like, okay. So I think we have to think, what are the messages we want to get? Because I mean, believe me, I was like, oh my gosh, I've made a mistake, and it's a wonderful school, right? So I was like, I got to get them out of that school. And so how much do we say to ourselves, I do want my children to know that it's real, but I don't really want to say to a 12-year-old online, there's the most vicious things, right, that you've ever heard. And then I think about my own experiences growing up in Cleveland, one of few Jews in my community, but certainly a Jewish community. And my mother was frantic she was born in 1939. She was a frantic person. She went out there and fought for lots of good things for people. But she would say to them all the time, there are people out there who hate the Jews. There are people out there, and I would just say, stop it, or shut up, But she warned me, right? My dad grew up in the Bronx in the 30s and 40s, and he would say, oh yeah, there are people who loved us, the people who hated us. And he was very but when you needed a stickball team, everybody loved everybody. So he was very much that's out there. And I tried to take as much from him as I could, but when I went to college, I had my first very face-to-face, where somebody actually said to me, I've gotten to know you a little bit, and you're really nice, and you don't have horns. And I was 1982, it wasn't 1950. And I thought to myself, thank goodness my mother told me. So
I'm sorry, I reacted that way because that literally happened to me in Chicago.
Yeah, and I was in Ann Arbor, right? But so this is the point to parents. I think we do have to prepare children to say, there are some people who've never met someone Jewish. When I got to college, there was a grad student I was friends with, and he was from New York, very Jewish, Goldberg, and he goes, do you realize most of the people on this campus have never had a bagel? They don't know what one is. It's a different world now. So So I was like, oh yeah, most people have never met a Jewish person at the University of Michigan in 1982. So I do think we want to say to children, you know, especially like here in Manhasset, like we live in a place that there's lots of different people, but a lot of us are Jewish. There are people who've never met someone Jewish, they don't really know who we are, and they might say things that are not kind and might be hurtful. And I want you to know that, and to you to come home. If anyone ever says, or something happens, or you're confused, come home and ask me, because it's that open communication that we have to prepare them for. And to not have them be scared in the world, but to be ready is how I see it. And not ready like, oh my gosh, is it lurking around every corner? I don't think we want to hold children back. And then at the same time, we're giving them pride. And you know, I always say the holidays are the best time to give children a sense of, one of my sons said to me years ago, you know what I love about the holidays, Mommy? And I said, what? And he said, the table you set. And I was like, oh yeah, I mean, what do you take from it? They're not like, oh, let's go through the scripture here. Like, they're like, do we have to go to synagogue, right? But I thought, oh, that's what they'll take with them, and then the warmth of the people coming. So it's both of those, and it's tricky.
Yeah, it's very
I
tricky.
hope that gives some people something to chew on at least, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I will say it's been a
hard.
time, and I know that here on Sunday, apparently our 7th graders didn't realize that Palestine isn't actually a country. So my 7th grader came home and was like, did you know? Yeah. Yes, I did, actually. And so we had a whole conversation, and it was good to have him just like come home and be like, oh,
what is this?
but they're exposed to stuff that, like, it never occurred to me that he didn't know that, because he's hearing all of this stuff from outside of our house. And so it's hard to know, like, what they're actually digesting from the world and how to deal with it when you don't even know that it's coming in.
So this is a good point that you brought that up. I think the idea of open communication, which is, he came home and said that. We often have to exhale as the parent, right? How often do children come home and they say something, or they ask a question, or they tell you, you're like, yeah, right? And that now you have a discussion, right now it's about Palestine, is it a country? And then in a year, he thinks about it differently. So even if he knows it, he thinks about it differently. And so then he comes home with new questions, right? And that's what we have to be open for, right? And you never know what the question's going to be. You don't know when it's going to come. And to sometimes say, you know, I don't really know what to say right now. Like, I'm going to think about that. Because so often we're taken aback, and we're like, what? Like, either what happened or your friend said what? It's often a friend, right?
Always the friend.
And you're like, holy smokes. So to say, you know what, I'm not really sure what to say right now. And to come back to them actually gives them trust, right? They're not looking to us to have answers, they're looking to us to hear them, truly.
Yeah. So similarly, in the not knowing what they're getting in the world, I grew up in an era before social media existed. Like, Facebook came out while I was a senior in college, so I'm old. My kids have the misfortune of having a very tech-savvy parent, so it's not me, for the record. But my husband is really good at keeping their stuff very locked down. So, like, I benefit from having a person who can block things coming into the house. I don't really understand what he does, but great. My kids can't see, like, YouTube. They can't see stuff that we don't want them to see, which is great. The thing that I've realized in recent years is even if my kids don't have access to it in my house, their friend does, and they watch it on the bus, and I have no ability to control what is being shown to my kid on the bus on the way to school. And social media is just completely terrifying as a parent, especially these days as a parent of boys. I feel like there's so much toxic stuff that exists online that they have access to in a way that's just terrifying. So do you have any tips for me staying calm, for helping them to sort through it, for how to parent with this new fun?
This is the $2 million question. So I guess the Jonathan Haidt ban has not made it onto your school buses.
No. Our middle school has no phones
But
at
what about the
school,
bus?
but the bus
Yeah,
is
the
a
bus is
different-
always the Wild West. My kids took a school bus for a little while, and they were begging me to take them off that bus, and then there was like a situation on the bus, and my tougher child came home crying, and he goes, "See, I told you don't make us take the school bus." So I was like, you're right. He was like in third grade. It's like, okay, you're off the school bus. Because I could take a city bus, but I just thought the school bus would be safer. Who knew? It's not. So the school bus is the Lord of the Flies. So, the social media question is a big one, obviously. And I'm sure you know this already, but like all of the data, much data is not as clear as media wants to make it, but the data that is clear is that children before a certain age really don't have the control to use it. It sounds like you already have that in your family, but to anyone else listening, the later you give children a phone, the better. There's no question that is clear. On the other hand, they do live in a world of tech and media. So I'd have to say, maybe it's controversial to say this, but I think children do need exposure in healthy ways. Because I don't know what it does to say to a child, have nothing, and then all of a sudden at 14, give it to them. Like, that scares me in some ways too. So at home, you do need a lot of controls. And what you can't control is the friend's house, the bus. My kids were playing video games at friends' houses that I was like, I finally had to let go and say, oh, okay, you can play that at their house. Just come home and tell me. That was always like the deal. I wasn't going to forbid them to go to somebody's house just because they were playing the game. But usually the values of the home are what are seeping in, and they'll come home and they'll say, there was something on the bus that I saw, and they're like hesitant. You have to be the calm one. This is where it's like, take care of ourselves. Oh, so what'd you see? Oh, really? When inside you're like, because then they keep talking. And they know that you're an ally. Because I think what we want to do is shut children down, is we want to say, how many times have I told you that's inappropriate? That word inappropriate, I'm like, strike it from your language with your children. Because then they're like, I'm going to be judged. I'm not going to tell you. I will admit, I have a child who literally tripped over. He was way too young, and it was before all this proliferation, a porn site, and our nanny was there, and she called me up and said, I don't know what to do, but this is what happened. He was spammed in the early days of email, where he had like my email, my husband. He got spammed, and I saw in his email, like the outbox, whatever the sent, in those days it was called the outbox. He kept writing back and saying, leave me alone, I'm just a kid. And I think in those days it was people, it wasn't a bot. I felt terrible. And it was like, how long? It was just going on for like a couple days after school. I know, I felt terrible. But then he trips on this site. Well, I went down this deep dive, because this was before people were talking about, I was like, I need to see what's out there. I counsel parents, so then I was like, whoa. But we just said to him, that's not your fault. It wasn't. And that's scary. And he was like, is that what sex is? And I just said, no. That's not. Some people that's not. And then he would, over months would come back and ask a question. He was like 9. He was a little kid. And I just had to say, no, that's not sex. It's very loving, honey. It's very loving. I don't know why those people were doing that. And I think he maybe had like a moment. My sister, the way she described it, I don't think he had love, but she said he was just like stunned. So I think we have to, and I literally had to be like, calm, and say to myself, calm, right? And walk him through, because I thought to myself, I want my kids to keep talking to me. I want them to come to me and say, and I just kept saying, you didn't do anything wrong. You didn't do, and then of course, I was like, monitor. They taught me to monitor. And in those days, parental controls, they're a little better now, but like they blocked everything, so then they couldn't do their homework. They couldn't play Minecraft. I was like, oh, this is like a nightmare, right? You can't block everything. So it was like a lesson to me of I can't control it all, but I can be there. And I think that's partly what you want to do with children to know that you can't control what they do out there. And everyone else has a phone, they're going to stand on their phone, but they can come home to you and feel safe. They can feel safe, and they need to feel safe because they're going to see things that you just can't believe. And the algorithms make it much worse, right? Yeah. So you can forbid what you forbid at home, but you have to be there to be receptive to the rest of it, and that's the world. I know.
Yeah.
That's the world.
Similarly, as I said, I'm the mom of boys, and I worry about boys and toxic masculinity and all of these other things that, but I feel like they get kind of squashed sometimes to be like told that their like rambunctiousness is bad, and there are things like that. And I feel like I spend a lot of time trying really hard to be like, they're boys and that's okay, and like they want to like bash things and that's okay, and I can let them go and whatever. But I also am like a deep feminist myself, and so I keep being like, don't you want to play with this doll? And they're like, absolutely not, awful, terrible, no thank you. And I have to accept that. But do you have any tips for, and obviously it's not relevant to me, but I'm sure other people have girls. Are there any like specific gender things that you think that we need to be aware of, especially because I feel like things are heightened by all of the social media?
Everything. I've taught at a women's college for 30 years, and I have Barnard and Columbia students, but predominantly women because Barnard's all women. I have boys in my house raising. I'm like, am I still raising you guys? Do I say I raised you? Through words. So I think about these things a lot, actually. And again, I'm going to put it back on us. We have our own gendered views. Mm-hmm. So it's really important, I think, to think about what are our views and what are we communicating inadvertently, often. For me, maybe because I am female, it's easier for me to think about the messages to girls in some ways, which is like, be nice, be kind, suck it up. And then there I am at Barnard saying, no, you don't need to apologize. Like, they'll say, oh, I'm sorry, I don't agree with your viewpoint. I'm like, you don't have to say I'm sorry, right? And so how do we help all children stand up for themselves? It gets back to what I was saying before, stand up for themselves and see the other and be connected and kind, even when they don't understand. My friend's so upset again. It's like, I know, but maybe you could reach out a hand to him. And I think that goes across children. And so it's really to come up, I think one of the reasons we use that word rambunctious for boys is because often we don't let girls be that way, and then we call them things like, I was certainly called by teachers sassy. And it took me years as an adult to realize, wait, we don't call boys sassy. Right?
I do.
You do, okay, well, it's like that was thrown at me in front of an entire class, like in middle school, which we call junior high school, right? Don't be sad. It was standing up to teachers. Like, girls weren't supposed to do that, and they were male teachers, right? So, but really thinking about, when do we think, if you have girls, when are we thinking that they're too aggressive, that they're being too bold, for example? And when with boys, are we like, that's too much aggression, or you're being wimpy? Like, so many parents worry, particularly with younger children, about, I call them the very observant children, right? They just hold back. Any of you have this one? My first one was like this, right? They watch, they watch, they watch, they watch. And then they don't want to get involved in the group, but if they find a friend, they might, and then that becomes a good friend, or that friend has to walk them through it. And they're still like that at 5 and at 6 and at 8, and I say, well, that's just who they are, and are they doing okay? Yeah, they've got friends. All right, but we don't like that particularly in boys. Why? Because boys are, and then we say, wait, but I'm not that person, and then you realize, yeah, I am. And then the same thing with girls. We get these really bold little girls who are like, they are in the middle, call them sort of the bull in the china shop. But one mom just wrote to me, they've moved to London, and this daughter is a ballet dancer now. When I tell you she was a bull in a china shop, I'm like, at 2 years old, she was like racing up to the magician up front, barreling by everyone. The mother I was like, if it's embarrassing, you don't take her to the parties. It's not fair to her. She's like, and now she's doing ballet, right? She's like, so really thinking about what are our gender stereotypes and where are we using language. Language matters, everybody. How we label our children, either to ourselves, I mean, we don't usually say it to them like you're being a sissy, but in your head, you're like, what a wimpy son I have. Or the common one, and I got this a lot, working with young children, I hear those sweet parents in the hallway going, do not cry, and it's much more often to the boys. And then I go out there and I go, you can cry here when mommy and daddy leave, you can cry. The parent goes, and I go like, how many times have I told you they can cry here? But it's more to the boys than it is to the girls, right? And so even the kindest, most loving of us, we are who we are, and we come from where we come, and you have whatever parenting you had, even if it's loving parenting. So you have to really reflect on those parts of self, because the world gets gendered, right? Toy stores didn't used to be gendered. They're very gendered the last 30 years, right? So again, not new, but not from 50 years ago either. And so the messages are very, very clear in toy. I've been working a little bit with a toy company, 2 women, Orthodox Jews in Miami, who started a toy company because they both had boys and were like, wait a minute, don't we want them to grow up to be loving daddies? Why don't they get to play with strollers? They play with cars. So they started this company. I'll give them a plug, Heart and Hero it's called. And they're trying to figure out how to appeal to the boys' space of, you can have a stroller, we'll make it neutral colors. You can they're like, how do we nurture this in boys and not tell them all the time, you're gonna suddenly be a daddy one day, but don't ever play with stuffed animals or dolls or anything else. So I think having that awareness. One of my kids his best friend to this day is a girl that they've known each other since they were babies. And he would go over to her house and he'd say, Sarah and I played dolls, because Sarah, she always wants to play dolls. He was like, not me, but he loved, I had a dollhouse, because I had a dollhouse growing up, so of course I got my kids a dollhouse, and he always played with that dollhouse, right, but he knew enough by the time he was 5, don't play with the baby dolls when your friends are over, but go to her house, I can play with the baby dolls, right? So they figure out that the world's bombarding them with messages from a young age, and certainly by the teenage years. But I will say, parents have a tremendous influence on children, and so what you're doing at home, what you're saying to them at home, but also how you're acting at home. If you do have a partner, if there's 2 of you, if you're a same-sex couple or a heterosexual couple, I would say even in same-sex couples, I often see one is doing the more traditional, what we would consider male, and one female. Certainly in heterosexual couples, you can go home and say wait, are we totally gender divided here? And then I'll have parents say to me, yeah, but it's more, in my family, my husband works and I don't. I say, so he can never wash a dish? What are you doing all day? You're taking care of 3 children. So to really think about that, because children watch us. They watch us. They're like, oh, mommy does this, daddy does this, grandma does this, grandpa does that. Right? So to really think about how, and is one parent dominant? I mean, I've got a pretty big personality. My husband's quieter. There were times I'd be like, oh, I need to back off a little bit here. What messages are we giving our children in our own interactions, in our own messages? And I will tell you, I have a child who wanted to wear pink, and he said to me one day, it's about 4, he goes, Mommy, who decided that girls got all the pretty colors and boys got all the boring colors? And I was like, you're right. Who decided? Because I had just come back from a trip to China, and there's a lot of pink. And I know this about children of my friends who are Chinese. Boys and girls wear pink and purple. Mm-hmm. Right? So I was like, yeah, who decided that? And so he was like, then I'm going to wear pink to school. And I said, okay. But some people might think that's only for girls. We don't. And he was like, well, I'm going to tell them it's not. And I knew that he had the strength to do it. And I talked to the teacher. I always say, talk to the teacher. And I knew it was a support, right? But I was like, yeah, you go. But the messages are clear. The messages are clear to children.
Great. I don't want to monopolize all the time. I want to make sure that you have some Q&A time. So I want to open it up.
Do you want to give the mic? Should we take the mic for the live stream?
I'll walk around with the mic.
Or,
Have people go over there? Yeah.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. How do you deal with children who struggle to regulate their emotions. And you're trying to be calm, but their response is, they don't know how to. Like, you could tell. They really don't know, and they get triggered. And although you're being the calm, it lasts for extended time period. Like, how do you deal with it? It's like the tantrum that's like, no matter what, it's triggering them. So even when you're giving them the consistency, the trigger is still there, and it's not like once in a blue moon. It's like maybe 5 times a day.
Yeah. How old is your child?
6.
Okay, so I'm going to just broaden this because I'm sure a lot of people have a child like this. I certainly had. Still, even as adults, I can see the threads of it for him. But now he's aware. I can actually say to him, there's that thing, and he's like, yep, there's that thing. So when I say stay calm, I always feel like I should clarify this. There's no such thing as staying calm all the time, and a child who's really aroused needs you to come up a bit. So think of it, I always say, think of it like if it's your friend or your partner and you're really like upset about something and they go, I'm here for you. Now, most of us aren't violent, I don't think, in this room. Maybe you are, I don't know. But most of us would have some kind of physical reaction, shall we say, right? So children need us to come up and meet them part way.
Okay.
Like, it's not just, when those children are really, they're riled, think of it, it's in their whole body, their brain has just let go. You may have read this somewhere, but the data, I mean, the developmental neuroscience only knows about, 0.1 billionth of what we need to know about the brain, but what we do know is that the prefrontal cortex, which is what makes us an adult, right, handles emotions, controls impulses, right? Most adults don't go like, ugh, that brownie, although we'd like to, we don't throw our food. We don't kick the person in front of us in line. But all of that impulse control, emotion regulation, kind of rationality is in the prefrontal cortex. It goes offline when a child's upset because it's not going to be developed until the mid-20s, which is amazing. It's why my college students, the best Columbia Barnard college student, would mess up big time, and I'd be like, what? What do you mean you just did that? Well, and I'd say, okay, because they're not fully developed. But they need you to come closer, usually, to come up a bit, literally to go like, you're mad, you're mad, you're mad. Either give them, some children need to get that out. Somebody just argued with me the other day about this, like, well, why would you let a child punch a pillow? Doesn't that make them more aggressive? I said, well, think about it. It's in their body. We know this from the brain to the body. So first you've got to get it out physically often before you can even come to the calm. Other children need you to wrap their arms around them. It depends on the child. Like this is a personality thing.
She doesn't like that. Actually, she wants to.
Yeah, then I would.
It's in her body. You could tell it's in her body.
When it's in children's bodies, why do you think adults go to those boxing things? I have a boxing gym near me, which I don't go to, but I'm like, maybe I would like that. And I watch the people in it, and I'm like, yeah, like if you need to get it outward, and it actually helps children regulate. How many of you are runners or exercisers, right? When you're stressed, if your friend or your spouse says to you, go for a run, and you do, you come back feeling better. That's the equivalent in young children. But I always say, if you have that child who really gets that upset at home but doesn't at school, you're good. Because they feel safe at home. There's the good news. They trust you. That's the good news, bad news. It's when it's happening in both places that you have to say, okay, we really have to figure out what's going on.
No, I get that. But there also has to, what happens is it shifts the dynamic of the family too. I have 4 kids. I have 3 boys and she's the youngest. And that's also the dynamic of the relationship, that she understands that too, that she can get.
All right, I'm going to give you another piece of advice because we have to move on to the next question. Treat her like a baby. Treat everybody listening, when your child is falling apart, they need to be babied. It's actually true. They often need you to give them a little bit more. Some need to be just kind of at your hip, at your leg. They need you to remind them that they're your baby forever. Every child needs this around their birthday. Think of when your child's birthday is, as they come up on their birthday and they're like, I'm going to be 8, I'm going to be 8. You're like, and you're still my baby. They're like, wait a minute, whatever age, 4, 5, 6, 7, wait, what does that mean? So when we give them the baby love, the kind of like, you look at pictures with them, there's this like, it's like when we do memories. My brother was just visiting my older brother. He's like, I was like, are you really only 18 months older than me? What did mom do? Like, that must have been hard. I say mom because my dad was a postdoc in those years at NYU, so it was really my mom, our mom. But we were just like recounting all these great stories of growing up, because it's easy to recount all the bad stuff, and we were laughing, we were having a good time, and then after we were both like, we just feel better. Children need that too. They need to be reminded, I'm going to still take care of you. You're still my baby. Tell them baby stories.
Thank you.
I think you have to go to the mic for the live stream. Okay, for the live stream people, if they're still on.
Go up or just speak it? Haven't read your book yet. I'm excited to. I really like a lot of the concepts around owning what you've done wrong, repairing, apologizing. But there's one term, you brought up those traits that we want our children to develop. There's one term that sort of struck me the wrong way, which is the homeostasis part. There's a cluster of traits that I want my child to develop that I didn't really see reflected. Some of them might be self-sacrifice, a sense of justice, coming to the defense of others, humility. I guess you might call them in your profession the superego traits. And the thing is I really need to teach them to lean away from homeostasis. I mean, an example is I was very proud. My kindergartner last year, some kids were playing with another girl's lunchbox, throwing it back and forth, and she was very upset. And he marched right up, and he grabbed out of a kid's hand, gave it back to her, and he said to the others, "That's not kind." Now, if what he was interested in was feeling accepted and feeling good, he might have laughed seeing it, he might have joined in. I mean, even empathy, to what extent could you expect it of a kindergartner? And it, I think, comports with Judaism to some sense of justice ye shall pursue, tikkun olam. And I'm wondering how you reconcile this desire to build resilience in the face of anxiety, to say things will be okay, but maybe to tell your kids, you see October 7th protests at colleges, maybe it's not enough to say that there's still people who like Jews in the world. Maybe you need to get on that counter-protest line and face down, of course, non-violently, but
Right.
to step up and pursue perhaps something that might make you a little more anxious.
Yeah, it's a good question. So let me clarify what homeostasis means. It's not like, homeostasis is a state that we try to get back to. So after your son goes over and says like, hey, that's not nice, maybe gets the box and gives it back to her, he may then go sit down and go back to his lunch, right? Or go to a teacher and say, hey, this wasn't nice, or whatever. That's the coming back down, right? We can't always be up, right? That's what's actually, we know this from the heart literature, right? Like stress on the heart rate. So you can get up there and then you come back down. And when you can get back down to homeostasis, then you can go back up, right? So we want to be grounded is kind of the place we return to. I call that like the home state, right? After your hardest day, your child comes home or you come home from work, you just kind of want to be like, I'm home again. If home's a good place, and we want home to be a good place. So I think that sense of justice, which I agree with you, children definitely get, comes out of empathy. For self, for the people they care about, and for other people, right? He may not even, I don't know if you know that child or not, he might not have, but he said, that's not a kind thing. Comes from, that's not happening to me, but I wouldn't like that, and that's not nice to do to her. Comes from that feeling of, I'm loved, I'm taken care of, I trust that people meaning my parents, aren't gonna criticize me or judge me when I'm having a hard time. There's limits, you may be corrected, but when I'm having a hard time, I'm not gonna be ridiculed or shamed, like what's wrong with you? Then he gets the strength to say, now I wanna look at the outer world. And I think that sense of justice comes from, I know what I have, and other people should have that too. And I think it's good that you're aware of that. Often what gets skipped over is like, well, no, first we have to give it to the child. Because I always think it's the people who feel really empty, like I need, which young children are self-centered. They're not selfish, they are self-centered because they're sort of like, are my needs met? But when they're met for the most part and they feel like, yeah, when I go home at the end of the day, I'll be taken care of, they can then look outside of themselves. And that's what you start to see like in 4-year-olds. 2-year-olds are just moving out in the world. 3-year-olds are still figuring it out. They're interested in other kids. 4-year-olds become all about the peers, and they become a little tough often. They're like, you get a lot of like superheroes, which is good conquering evil, by the way. People are like, I don't like that my kid does superheroes. I'm like, well, that's good conquering evil. That's social justice, right? And then they go to school, but if he's feeling like nobody's taking care of me, he's not going to look outward. And I think when they really do feel like I'm cared for, I'm okay, which is why you don't want them to feel alone in the world. They actually look outside themselves. But they do it from a base of, I'm okay first. It's like, how do you give up some of what you have? Most people won't give it up and starve, and you don't want your child to either. But they're like, oh, I have enough. You can have some. Sometimes, and other times they don't feel that way. And that's okay too, and that's the hard part, is when they don't feel that way, to really get some humor around, like, oh, so you're really not gonna give up any of that Lego? And they're like, nope. And you've gotta give them that leeway a little bit too, if most of the time they are willing to do it, because they need both. They need that sense of self, and I'm okay, and the ability to look outward. So thank you for that question.
So I wanted to ask you a question. We were talking about social media before and the attraction of things, and I think you're right on target. I mean, you really kind of, my kids like YouTube. I have to sit and watch with them a little bit to make, to show them that I can have some kind of stake in it and influence them. But on the flip side, my older son, he used to be, and he still is. I'm not going to say used to be, never going to be, but he used to love reading and writing. And he's recently, become far more reluctant to do this. I'll take him to the library, have him pick out a book, he'll pick it, and then he'll not want to do it. He reads a little bit more quicker, and he'll be like, oh, you read with expression, mommy reads with expression. No, I can't read, I'm not built that way. He's very smart. He'll say, I'm not built that way. He does see a therapist, so he's learned some, I guess, terms, but I'm not built that way. I'm like,
Tell him you went to a talk where you were supposed to appreciate him for who he is.
And I totally tell him. I reinforce how much I love him and how much I believe in him and all that stuff all the time, but I do want him to kind of develop the self-confidence to enjoy reading again, because it's the key to so much. What's some tips for that?
Yeah, so, I just read some, I think, survey data that, one of the things about phone bans, and I don't know how good the survey is, but I'm going to believe it because I like what it said, was that there's more library books being checked out at these schools that have phone bans. But I was like, okay, that's fine, but let's see in 6 months, or let's see any, I'm a little wary of I think when you model reading, anything you model at home, again, I can guarantee you children are seeing. They don't want to be lectured, ever. And teenagers, the least, and they hear nothing. Not when we lecture them. But when you give him a half a wish, which is what I think you're doing, I love this term, half a wish, so what are you watching on YouTube? And then you connect it some point later. I was reading this book, I'm sure you're not interested in it, but there was this thing that happened, and I thought, oh, that kind of reminds me of your YouTube. It just says to him, I'm with you, and you keep modeling the reading. I had a big thing with my kids that I was like, we live in New York City, you should like museums. Plus I had friends, I don't know if any of you have this, they were like, oh, I took my child to the museum for 2 hours today and she looked at Monet's, and she's 8 years old. I was like, I can't even get my kids in a museum. And one of the falling outs we had when they were just bringing this up, they were like, do you remember that day you got so upset with us? Because it was an exhibition years ago at the Jewish Museum, and I was like, just flatter me, come to the exhibition. And I couldn't even get them there. Last year, we got one of our children who was living in Philadelphia, membership to the Philadelphia Art Museum. Why? Because he was going so often. Living in Philadelphia, going to I was like, you're going to the art museum? But I think part of it is, not that I battled him, I'm not sure that helped, but he saw that we went to museums. And if we traveled somewhere, we would say all right, we get an hour, you can sulk the whole time, but we're going to this museum. We looked for animals depending on their age, and we gave them scavenger hunts. But But if you do it and you show them, not by lecturing, this is something that is of value to us, I think eventually, and you don't know when it is, and you have to hold your breath a long time, they do it. Or one of them, I mean, maybe they don't all do it, but yeah, I mean, I think it's a tough world for books and reading, but you can still buy them for Hanukkah. You can try to get them in their interest. You know, don't try to pull them out of what they're interested in, even if you're rolling your eyes like, that's what they're interested in. Yes, that's what they're interested in. Let somebody else buy them a book out of their thing, and then you never know. You keep it on the shelf, and one day you notice it's off the shelf, and you don't comment. That's the hardest thing. I always want to say, because you're reading that? But I'd be like, oh, you're reading a book. But I would just keep modeling it for them, because they absorb us in more ways than we can possibly know. And I say that with much more authority now that my children are older. I used to think it like, I think, I'm not sure, is this going to work? And then I see them as adults, and I'm like, wow. And I'll tell you the funniest example of that. My youngest is in college. I think I go for his sophomore year to visit, and he says, can we go? My parents lived like in a senior apartment building that had like a secondhand store. And he says, can we go? It's called the Shop Around the Corner. Can we go to the Shop Around the Corner? And I was like, sure, because it was all my parents' friends. My parents were now gone. I was like, yeah, because I'd love to go there. Why, what do you need? And he goes, I need a butter dish. It's like a 20-year-old male, right? So we go, and he says to them, and they know him because each year he goes to visit the Shop Around the Corner, and they said, oh, what do you, oh, we're so happy to see you. Everybody's charmed. What do you need? And he's like, I'm looking for a butter dish. And of course they laugh, and they're like, how do you know what butter dish is? And he points to me and he goes, we have a butter dish at home. What else do you put butter in? And I thought, oh, first of all, would I even know that my kid had noticed that the butter goes in a butter dish? No. But that's what I mean. I mean, it sounds funny, the butter dish, but I'm like, that's for all the cultural things that we care about. That's why we have them go to temple even when they don't want to, even if they're there. At the points that I was like, okay, just come for a half hour. Just let me know when you're leaving. It's up to them later to decide, do I want this in my life or not? It's not up to us. But give them enough of it that they can decide. And so that's what I would say about any of the cultural stuff. And I'm going to say books are culture, like, you know, keep doing it, yeah.
I want to be respectful. Tovah has to get back to my hat.
So should we do a last question?
So, one question, and then we will go out, and she will be available to sign the books, and you can have a quick question around it. So, one last question. And 2 days to take everybody.
I answered them all. I will leave you with have humor, have humor, have humor, because it's the only thing that will get you through your roughest parenting moments. Thank you all. Thank you for having me.
Will we bring that sign? There's also coffee outside. You can take it home yourselves.
I probably smelled this frying schnitzel, and then my husband walked in. We like ate quickly, and I was like, the little ones are in bed, and my older ones are awake, and I said, I gotta go.